both of these players are Ohio kind of regional grinders. Evan Wagstaff has a handful of Open Series top 8s to his name already, looking to pick up another one. Neither of these guys have a trophy yet, but they are both hungry. I've definitely seen both of these guys around at multiple events.
So Max with a turn 2 Mammoth Jet. It appears that Evan has mulliganed a few times here, missing some mana here. The Naya Hexproof deck, not with the best mana base.
No, it's going to benefit a lot from Mana Confluence, for sure.
Absolutely. So we see a third land here, Chandra's Phoenix. So those are the only copy of creature in Max's deck. He has 4 Chandra's Phoenix, no Storm Breath Dragons, no Ash Zealots. The rest of it's just all burn spells.
Yeah, this is very much a burn deck. He has 1 Chandra Pyromaster, and that is the only other recurring source of damage.
So Temple of Plenty there for Evan. Finally finds a third land, but comes into play tap. Max with a second copy of Chandra's Phoenix. And now here's Witchstalker.
As you described this match before we actually cut to it as 2 ships passing in the night.
Yeah, neither deck really has much in the way to interact with one another.
Yeah, these are actually, basically they have very linear game plans, each of them, and they are going to throw that game plan at each other until someone dies.
Yeah, and the concession that both of these players have to opposing creatures are burn spells, but of course nothing in Evan's deck is targetable. Max barely plays any creatures at all, and so it just turns into a pure race.
Sure. Max is going to present just Chandra's Phoenixes as targetable creatures, and those things come back.
Yep, so there is an Unflinching Courage. Evan trying to turn this game around. He gets hit with a Skull Crack, falls to 5, Phoenix is across, and I assume we're going to see, a Boros Charm and a Lightning Strike, and that is a quick game 1.
Very quick, and decisive, too. That 1 Skull Crack actually, I'm pretty sure, made the difference on its own.
Yeah, I think that Skullcrack, it's often brought up as a card that is a good answer to Sphinx's Revelation. It's fine against those decks, but I think its best tool is actually in fighting cards like Blood Baron, Viscopa, and Unflinching Courage. You saw it play a critical role there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and Skullcrack, the card, is best in certain shells. You need Skullcrack in a deck that is trying to deal damage quickly and doesn't necessarily have a plan once it runs out of gas. Well, against Sphinx's Revelation, sure, you maybe stop them from gaining 5 life, but they're still going to draw 5 cards, and those 5 cards will probably beat you unless you are finishing the game out very, very soon, or you have some kind of engine of your own.
Right. So we're going to be going on the sideboard here. Evan's Naya Hexproof deck. He has an Ajani Call of the Pride, a Bramaz, a Boros Charm, a Celestia Charm, 4 Skylashers, 2 copies of Bending Touch, 2 Destructive Revelry, and 3 copies of Fiendslayer Paladin. Because the burn deck has access to Chain of the Rocks, and it's not clear if Max knows for sure that he's playing against a strict hexproof strategy, he may be keeping in some of his removal spells. That said, I still think Fiendslayer Paladin is something you want to bring in here.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, any source of life gain is crucial against a deck that is just trying to nug you. So, yeah, Fiendslayer Paladin is something you have to lean on here. And in this particular case, it does have virtual hexproof. It does turn the Chain of the Rocks on, but as you said, Max doesn't know that the Chain of the Rocks are dead here, quote-unquote dead. They actually do have some targets still, but he has to suspect it. The only creature he saw there was a Witchstalker. Yeah,
and Evan's deck has a slightly different twist on it. The creature base, 4 copies of Glade Cover Scout, 4 copies of Voice of Resurgence, 4 copies of Witchstalker. We're used to seeing that out of these Naya Hexproof lists. 2 copies of Eidolon of Countless Battles, a card that received a lot of hype when Born of the Gods was spoiled. Hasn't really found a home in that many decks, but Evan has 2 copies in his main deck alongside 2 copies of Gorkland Rampager to fill out his creature base.
He does have, I love this addition of a little bit of spice to the traditional Naya Hexproof deck. Those Eidolon of Countless Battles, we were talking earlier, that's a card that did not see as much play as we think Wizards probably intended.
Yeah, no, it's definitely pushed. The numbers on it are quite good. Hasn't really found a home yet, but it is here in Evan's Naya Hexproof deck.
Now, Max McVety, his sideboard doesn't really have anything for this matchup that I can see. He has 4 Satyr Fire Dancer, 4 Rakdos Cackler, 2 Assemble the Legion, 2 Blind Obedience, 2 Peak Eruption, and 1 additional Chain to the Rocks. That's the 4th to go with the 3 that are in his main deck. Just eyeballing it, I don't know that I want any of these effects against the Hexproof deck.
Yeah, there's not a lot to do here. It's possible that you would want, if you knew for sure what you were playing against, it's possible you would want some copies of Rakdos Cackler against some of the, to side out some of your more dedicated anti-creature cards, but that's a pretty extreme measure, and Evan's already shown Witchstalker, which blanks your Cackler anyway, so It's possible Max here is just going to shuffle up and present the same 60.
It's possible. You mentioned he maybe wants to get rid of those Chain to the Rocks, but the reality is Chain to the Rocks is actually not dead even against a hexproof deck. Evan does play 4 Voice of Resurgence. That's a stock addition. That's usually the one non-hexproof creature that hexproof decks have traditionally played. He's also presenting 2 Gore Clan Rampagers and the 2 Eidolons as additional non-hexproof threats, and he's going to be bringing in those Fiendslayer Paladins. Max doesn't know that necessarily, but it's a pretty common sideboard plan.
Yeah, reasonable to expect that Fiendslayer Paladins could be coming in.
Yeah, I think it's a safe hedge to just leave those Chain to the Rocks in, even if you do think that you're facing a hexproof strategy. Other than that, the Searing Bloods actually are probably a little worse. I could see cutting the Searing Blood.
Sure.
Yeah. Again, you only have Voice of Resurgence that you can target with that, and that's not exactly an exchange that you want to be making.
Because Chain of the Rocks can still get you out of Voice of Resurgence is in play, and now there's a creature enchantment on it. Once that scenario happens, Searing Blood is no longer in the equation.
Yeah. You can... Evan's deck is kind of a one-trick pony in the sense that it needs to get a creature into play and then put some pants on it in order for the deck to actually do anything. So Evan frequently has to kind of mulligan aggressively to get those kind of starts that he needs. So he doesn't always have the luxury of a hexproof creature to put all of his enchantments on.
Yeah, sometimes you are just going to have a Voice of Resurgence or even a Selesnya Charm token and just have to go for it.
Yeah, I forgot about the Selesnya Charm, so that's actually an additional 4 possible targets for those effects. So, yeah, I think I like the same 60, actually, for Max McVety.
Looks like Max is ready to present here.
Did we get any more mulligans? I know that Max took several mulligans in game 1. So.
They have not even drawn up 7 yet. Max has been taking his time shuffling.
Wow, okay. It's... When you get a chance to be on camera, it's nice to kind of bask in the moment.
Yeah, just take it all in.
Yeah, fair enough. These 2 players, actually, I don't know about basking. These two both look kind of tense.
Well, it's 5-1. You know, this is for one player, top 8 berth is over, and for the other player, there's still several rounds in front. So
that makes plenty of sense. So Evan. I'm really pleased with the direction that that Standard has taken in the last 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. I feel like a month ago, Standard was just this mid-range, control-y slug, and things have gotten much more aggressive. Yeah, I feel like in the last 2 weeks.
There's definitely the tools there to build successful aggressive decks. I think the problem is that a lot of them match up very poorly with either blue or black devotion. It's very hard to build a deck that beats both of those decks. You know, the red deck that I've been playing a lot is the mono blue matchup is just unwinnable or very close to it. And most of the beatdown decks you can build either fold to a boatload of removal spells or mono blue devotion gumming up the ground. It's hard to beat both of those things. And that's not even just to talk about your Esper matchup, which isn't even necessarily good depending on how your deck is exactly built. So it's very hard to find the right recipe of things to compete against blue, black, and Esper / blue-white, but the tools are definitely there. There are decks out there that at least have positive matchups with 2 of the 3 decks in question. Yeah,
for sure. And Mono Blue Devotion, that's a deck that has really ebbed and flowed too. It's kind of odd. At the very beginning of this Standard season, there was almost a binary Standard where there was Black Devotion and Blue Devotion, and there was the debate about which of the 2 was the best deck. Mono Blue Devotion, I feel like, almost completely went away there for a while and has also kind of been slowly making its return, and that makes sense. You know, it traditionally preys on red and green aggressive decks.
Yeah, but it's not that great against Palakranos, and Palakranos was all over the place to start the season. Turn 1, Temple Garden here for Evan, Temple of Triumph for Max. Both players on 6 cards.
Yeah, Evan only has the one drop, actually. That's the only 1-drop that hexproof decks have access to, so it's unlikely that we'll see any action within the first couple of turns, although it looks like Evan is going to get on the board now. No, just going to representing Selesnya Charm, I would assume.
Yeah, pretty loud statement of the Selesnya Charm is in the hand.
Yeah. Could be representing, I guess, a burn spell or something like that, but there's not much reason for him to suspect that.
So there's the Selesnya Charm.
Now, we mentioned, of course, that Evan sometimes has to play a non-hexproof creature to put his enchantments on. In this particular matchup, when Max's deck is literally nothing but burn spells, this is a really uncomfortable spot for Evan if you have an enchantment here.
Well, I don't think you can even enchant here if you're in Evan's spot. You just take the hit.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. If I'm Evan, I just attack here for sure. And I know that sometimes you kind of feel like there is some pressure to actually enact your game plan once you get the chance to. But a little patience here goes a long way for Evan.
So there is a animation of a Mutavault there to try to block the token. That is going to get a Boros Charm out of Evan using either Double Strike or Indestructible. Who knows, but works the same.
Either way. As long as he did not try to 0.4 damage at it.
And Max just plays Mutavault and passes the turn back.
So Evan, again, faces the same decision. I don't think anything has changed. I think you're happy to keep crashing in for 2.
You can imagine him getting to a spot where he has multiple pieces of backup.
Yeah.
He could enchant if he said he had a Boros Charm in hand to potentially protect it against a removal spell.
Sure. Yeah, if his hand, for example, here was Boros Charm, Ethereal Armor, he could make that play. That doesn't necessarily get him anywhere, though.
Yeah, it's still risky.
Yeah.
Still super risky.
Well, it's risky, and that turns your 2/2 into a 3/3, which is still going to die to a lot of effects.
So another attack here, and Max runs it back, tries to block with the Mutavault. That's successful this time. And Evan with no follow-up play.
Yeah, and that's the risk of these Naya hexproof decks as opposed to just kind of the more traditional Naya aggro. Naya aggro just jams its deck full of creatures. So that instead of this Ethereal Armor that Evan has in hand, he would have a kind of a redundant creature so he could actually still be on the board and presenting damage.
It's interesting. There's a lot of, when you have Scout plus Ethereal Armor, you're regularly just blowing your opponent out of the water. And there's a lot of decks that can't answer Witchstalker, so that's a very stable source of putting enchantments on. But the rest of the deck is not necessarily set up to get an enchantment in the face of resistance.
Sure. Yeah, like other than the actual cards with the word hexproof on them. This game plan, there's a reason that creatures plus enchantments is not a traditional game plan that we see having success in Standard. Yep. You need hexproof creatures plus enchantments.
So Cackler comes across again. That said, if Evan does find his Witchstalker,
sure,
this game gets probably very ugly for Max very quickly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Max has not made much ground himself in terms of dealing damage. He has spent most of his turns actually dealing with what Evan is doing.
So we see a Magma Jet here from Max at the end of Evan's turn,
which he would hope will set up a little more action. That Rakdos Cackler has actually started to go to work, though. When you're playing a burn deck and you actually do get to stick a permanent source of damage and you actually do connect with it multiple times, that is a fantastic feeling.
The game becomes much easier, that's for sure. Yeah. Here's a Chandra's Phoenix.
So Evan falls to 10, and that's putting Evan in the range where Max needs to resolve something like 2 more spells to end the game.
And Max is just on a madcap skill, so 4 creature enchantments and a Boros Charm in hand right now.
Down to 6, and likely can finish it out from here. I know he has at least 1 Lightning Strike in hand.
Toil Trouble too, which is super insulting. As
that's that would actually would be one short of doing it on its own. So he's going to cast Boros Charm and Lightning Strike, it looks like, to finish that game out.
And Max McVety, 2 games to 0. Evan suffered some pretty poor draws there, but they are not draws that are out of the question for Naya Hexproof.
Yeah, the Naya Hexproof definitely a deck that has some pretty heavy swings. Yeah. It has some absurd nut draws and some draws that actually do nothing, as we saw in that game. And a fair amount of wiggle room in between.
Yeah. So Max McVety keeping his top 8 dreams alive. He is now 6-1. Evan Wagstaff now out of top 8 contention.